So I had a little thing I decided I was going to say to describe the book, and it isn't the usual speech I've been giving about the book or taken from any of the front matter of the book. I decided that since a lot of the people here are scientists of one kind or another, that I would take a chance and try to explain what sort of book this is in a different way. Basically, I give up. So, the first step is to recognize that where scientists generally perform experiments to test a hypothesis about the world, philosophers can sometimes be seen to perform what are called thought experiments. By thought experiment, I don't mean an empirical hypothesis like the one behind Galileo's falling bodies experiment, which predicted what would happen according to the law of parabolic fall, and was salutary precisely because it was empirically testable. I mean experiments in the realm of the thinkable rather than that of the knowable. In these sorts of thought experiments, thought can take flight. You establish a set of conditions and a set of rules of the game, both constitutive and regulative, and then you play out the implications. One of the ways that this can happen is by means of thought experiments that are explicitly counterfactual. What is meant by counterfactual? We see this sort of thinking arise naturally in the realm of human affairs with its normative judgments of right and wrong. For example, counterfactual thinking fueled the grief of Tacitus when he pondered what could have happened if Germanicus had lived to become emperor after Tiberius rather than, well, Caligula. On the humanist side of the fact-value distinction, we respond to various circumstances in the world and we say, this is wrong, it shouldn't have to be this way. And then we go on and say, what if? And then, if you're the right kind of freak like me, rather than merely imagining some utopian alternative, you go down the road of the counterfactual thought experiment. You ask, well, what exactly would have to be different, for things to be different? It's this sort of thinking that connects the critique of work as we know it and theorizing about the future of work, given a set of assumptions that I call, about what I call the wage-based society and how it is now breaking down. In the degrowth movement, for example, there is a subfield called degrowth economics, where the promotion of growth and the valorization of capital is radically de-emphasized in relation to various metrics of human need satisfaction that can be seen to coincide with metrics of environmental sustainability. As part of this, there is also what is known as the anti-work movement, which is skeptical of the work ethic, since the many decades of futurist prognostication claiming that technological advancement will lead to everyone having to work less has obviously failed to materialize. It then works to imagine and promote alternatives to capitalism wage-based society with its overemphasis on market value. Within the purview of degrowth economics and the anti-work movement, one also finds what are called post-work imaginaries. Cultural imaginaries are what some philosophers refer to as a culture or society's ability to imagine something at the collective level in a way that is foundational. Post-work imaginaries, which try to generate a new, imaginative post-work cultural space, can either be utopian or concrete in nature. The concrete version includes actual policies like universal basic income, for example, or other transitional forms that might be tried or tested at some scale and which might serve as a transitional bridge to somewhere else than the most dystopian outcomes. If an idea is just a kind of a fantasy and is not tethered to any realm of possibility, it could still have some value because it can still serve as a kind of a beacon helping people to direct their energies. Here at last we come to what I have been up to in my book. Rather than seek to contribute to the further development of these sorts of post-work imaginaries, I have taken on the project of developing what I call the post-work political imaginary. The post-work political imaginary are the set of attitudes and beliefs that a plurality of people would have, what they would have to think, feel, and believe in order for work as such to become something substantially deprivatized and thus to become a genuine public political issue as such, so that there could be a viable politics of the refusal of work as we know it, oriented toward the transition to a desirable version of a post-work society. Finally, there is one more twist that I have to mention. The book's organizational structure reflects what one could call a specific rhetorical strategy. One has to keep in mind that the intentions behind the book are practical or political in nature. It's not a proper history of work, and it's not a social scientific study of real-world working conditions. Instead, it's a radical political theory because it has a practical intent. I want to encourage certain targeted groups of people to become more resistive, to become active subjects of a politics of the refusal of work as we know it. For example, after the front matter, which describes what is meant by the Great Refusal and the politics of refusal, the first two chapters offer what I consider to be an initial or provisional answer to the question, increasingly, what is work today? Given these characteristics, what is the meaning of refusal in relation to it? This preparatory work continues across the next 4 chapters, where notions about work are radically historicized and exposed as dogmas, or various species of what Mark Fisher calls capitalist realism. This includes entrenched ideas about productivity and cycles of rest, idleness and leisure, debt forgiveness, things like that. I'm not going to say too much more about running through the different parts, but the different parts develop a certain kind of awareness or consciousness about the kind of that we have a historical relation to work in the modern age, and that it's changing in certain ways. And so we get to the digital age, which is what the book is primarily focused on. There's a fundamental question for philosophy about what is happening to the nature of value itself when more and more labor is being performed, or work is being performed by technological dead labor. You know, people, properly speaking, it's not the labor power of people that is producing what is being produced. And what that means for the kind of society we live in, if you believe that there is a connection between modes of production and modes of society, there is a very serious question to be answered about what kind of a society we're actually moving into. The final chapter of the book finally offers a concrete historical example about a politics of refusal of work, because it's been tried with mixed results one time in the modern or contemporary period, and that's in Italy in the 1970s. There's a movement called Operismo, which literally translates as workerism, and a group of theorists called autonomia theorists give a particular kind of account of the meaning of immaterial labor in the era of advanced technological capitalism. But there's a group of activists in the factories in northern Italy who start to refuse to work under the conditions they've been given in some very particular ways. And I trace the history of what actually happened, and I use the overall scene of Operismo to try to help validate the basic conceptual elements of the post-work political imaginary, and the real-world political struggle is offered as a prism through which these concepts are then leavened by real-world considerations. So that's my little description for today.